All right, guys, welcome back. I am so excited to have a very special guest here on our channel, Doc Steve. This is actually the second time that we have had Doc Steve here on the channel, and I'm just taking a moment just to get everything all set up here. Okay, we are good. We are live. So, welcome, Dr. Steve. So, a brief introduction. Dr. Steve has over 46 years of practice in quantum, integrative, and functional medicine. Dr. Stephen Small is Ivy League educated and he holds 4 doctoral degrees. Sounds like a lot of studying. He is frequently referred to as the doctor to the stars in the media because of his high profile celebrity medical practice in Los Angeles, where he treats many A-list members of the film, television, music, and sports community. I bet you've got some interesting stories there. He currently serves as the Dean of the International Medical University of Natural Education, NA, and he lectures all over the world. I feel so lucky to have you here. He's the co-author of the recently released Amazon #1 best-selling book, Wake Up, Miracles of Healing from All Around the World. And he has his private practice in Los Angeles, where he's taking some time out of his very busy day with patients today to speak with us. And in his practice, he specializes in quantum integrative medicine and as a time waiver practitioner, something we're going to talk about today. So in 2019, Doc Steve joined the Healy World team, where he's currently a vice president member, and his life mission is to introduce frequency healing to the world via the revolutionary Healy frequency device. And I love this. Last but not least, his motto is self-care is the new healthcare. So welcome back, Doc Steve. I'm so thrilled that
it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much.
Oh, such a joy. So our first interview went so well. It was really great to hear from you, to learn about your story with frequency, 46 years of practice. And I'd like to go deeper into some of the topics that we started exploring last time, but I'd like to just start with a little bit of an overview. What is quantum for people who are not familiar with that term, and how does it relate to our health?
Well, quantum comes from quantum physics, obviously, and it relates to our health because everything in the universe is connected, and we are quantum beings because when it comes down to it, below the organs and the tissues and the cells, we have, atoms, and they're composed of electrons, and they're composed of even smaller parts. And it's been said that most of our body is actually space, because when it gets down to it, when you look at the atom, it's basically more space than physical substance. So we are all connected, through quantum entanglement and the whole concept of just the way the structures are on this planet is that everything is composed of smaller and smaller and smaller atoms and electrons. So when it comes down to it, we're all basically quantum beings.
So it's like that saying, everything is energy. So
Everything is energy.
everything that we are is energy.
We have to always go back to the famous quote that I always quote by Nikola Tesla, who is my hero, which is that if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. And even Einstein said a similar thing. And those were, to me, two of the greatest minds of the 20th century. And even though they spoke these words 100 years ago, they're still as current as it was back then. As a matter of fact, it's even more current now, I believe, because there's been a big paradigm shift in the field of healthcare and medicine in realizing that for the last 100 years, we've really focused on the fact that the human being is more of a biochemical or chemical makeup, whereas in fact, it's actually electrical. And so that really changed and altered the course of medicine back in the early 1900s. And it also altered the course of medicine, as I mentioned in the previous interview, from thousands and thousands of years ago, because, traditionally, the first type of medicine that has been recorded is acupuncture from China 5,000 years ago. And they were the first civilization to understand the whole concept of energy and qi, and the fact that you can stimulate certain points, acupuncture points on the body, and open up channels, allowing energy to flow. And of course, then homeopathy in the 1700s, and then it was suppressed in the United States and around the world in the 1900s by, quote, big pharma money, and sort of the past 100 years have been basically focused on treating patients as biochemical beings by giving them biochemical substances, i.e. pharmaceuticals. And now we're returning to the source, and we're realizing that in order to really achieve ideal and optimum health in the body, we have to really treat the body in its essence, which is energy, not chemistry.
I love that. And I've noticed this in my community, and so many of the people that I've been talking to is people are waking up, they're practicing energy work. They're more open to these different modalities. You know, for a lot of people, you know, this is nothing new, but this device is sort of, it is stepping in as a new piece in this equation. So when we're talking about the Healy and other frequency devices out there, how and why does a frequency device actually work for people?
Well, because everything is composed of frequencies, so it's a whole process of what we call resonance. And if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, we see the frequencies in the world, which can start all the way down to like radio frequencies, and then we get to telephone frequencies that we're all aware of, and then we get into the light spectrum, and we have visible light and X-rays and infrared and ultraviolet. And we have even music, which is on that scale. So ultimately, everything has a frequency. And when we talk about resonance, we mean that if you have two objects that have the same resonance, they basically vibrate in sync with one another. So therefore, if you deliver a frequency to somebody, it resonates with the cells of the body, depending upon exactly which frequency you're using. So everything is in vibration. Everything is about frequencies. It all comes down to that. And again, that's the whole concept of quantum physics at work in the universe.
Wow, I find that to be so interesting that we can actually shift things on the physical level by working on the energetic level, because that's the source.
Well, there's an easy way to look at this for anyone that doesn't understand. Quantum physics 101. Take water, for example. It exists in three forms, okay? It's easy to visualize. You have ice, okay, which is a solid, and you apply heat, which is a vibration, to ice, and it becomes water. And then you apply heat to water, and it becomes steam. So as you can see, water can exist in three states. And when you understand that, which is a simple explanation, you can understand how everything else in the universe, based on the vibration. If it's a low vibration, you know, we'll have more of a solid. If it's a medium vibration, a liquid. If it's a higher vibration, steam. So basically on what level the substance is vibrating in tells you how that substance appears in the world. For example, you know, your desk that you're sitting in front of right now, it's obviously vibrating at a very, very, very low frequency, and that's why it's so solid. So if you can understand that concept, then you really can understand the whole concept of quantum physics. It's just an easy way of visualizing it that most people can wrap their head around, because a lot of the concepts in quantum physics are very, you know, require a lot of study and thought and understanding of those principles. But it's easy to see, you know, how you can have one substance that can appear in three different forms on the physical level, just based on how much energy you put into it, because heat is energy. So applying energy into ice creates water, then to water creates steam, and that's an easy concept, I believe, for most people to wrap their head around.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I like how you just really simplified it, because I know there are a lot of people who struggle to understand how this could be possible. But I know from my own experience, it's almost like beyond the level of just common understanding. It transcends what we know and maybe what we believe to be true, which is also why it's so important we have to experience it. Now,
I mean,
one way
you
that
know,
we
the best way to even go to that point of view is the fact that, you know, back in the, you know, 1700s, before there was microscopes, people didn't understand that there was, you know, the whole germ theory with bacteria and stuff. Well, there was nobody could ever understand that because they couldn't visualize it. As soon as microscopes came into being and they could actually see those bugs and that bacteria was like, ah, okay, so even though we never saw it for all those thousands of years, doesn't mean that it didn't exist. It means that we didn't have the ability to see it. And that's the whole concept of quantum physics, because we exist in so many different levels. We as humans can only see in the third dimension, right? 3D. But there's things happening in the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and it goes all the way out there. Just our ability to perceive in a way limits what we know. And the more time goes on, the more technology advances, we develop better and better instruments that allow us to perceive things that before we weren't able to perceive. So the human being is really stuck in that concept that if we can't see it, it's not real. But that's not true, obviously, from what I just said. Just because you couldn't see bacteria before, doesn't mean it didn't exist all those thousands of years. We couldn't perceive it.
Absolutely. And I think another great example would be if you told someone 100 years ago about a cell phone or email, the ability to send a message, they would not be able to understand that with the way that they were.
Although actually, I have to say something to you about that, because that's a great point, because I was just reading it the other day again. Nikola Tesla in the early 1900s literally came up with the whole concept of cell phones. And he has a famous quote saying that there will come a time when people will be able to communicate with one another very easily and quickly by a device that they'll be able to carry with them. He actually invented what is now the cell phone back 100 years ago. So again, he was so futuristic and so ahead of his time. I mean, when you think about Tesla, as I mentioned in our previous conversation, the reason why Elon Musk named his car the Tesla is because he literally went back in time and looked at the blueprints of the early 1900s, where Tesla created the first electric motor, and he had the blueprints that he developed back then. And Elon Musk literally used his blueprints of Tesla's original electric motor and dropped it into his car, and decided to call the car a Tesla in honor of Nikola Tesla. And so to me, that was the best thing that could have happened, because once his name got out there into the greater, universe there, now people are wondering, Tesla, they look it up and they start to understand who this guy was and all the amazing inventions that he had developed, hundreds of years ago, many of which were suppressed for various reasons. We see that the cell phone really is not a new thing. It's something that he designed 100 years ago. So,
I love that.
To look back at that and say, oh my God, it's hard to believe, but yeah, it's true.
Wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that. That's so cool. And of course, during his time, he was ridiculed. He was ostracized. Like, he struggled so much because people didn't believe him, and they didn't believe in.
Well, it's not they just didn't believe him. It had to do with the same thing that's happening over the last 100 years with medicine. It all had to do with money. So we all know that when you think about electricity, the first name that comes to mind is Edison, okay? Where in fact it should be Tesla, because Edison only developed what's called direct current, DC, which is like a battery. It's very limited in terms of what it can do. But George Westinghouse, who at the time was like a multimillionaire of his era, was the guy that was backing Edison. So of course, he didn't want somebody else to come in and sort of steal the thunder of what they were doing. And Tesla's whole concept was, no, it's not direct current that's going to be the thing that's going to really work, but it's going to be alternating current. And so therefore, his information was buried, until because of money. It always comes down to money, unfortunately, in this world. So many great possibilities, inventions, and things of that nature are actually buried. We never get to see them, because people realize that it's going to affect their ability somehow to achieve, success or money or etc. And so they rather buy that. I've heard so many stories of people coming up with these great inventions, and these rich people buy out the inventions, and then instead of bringing them forward, they just suppress it, because it's detrimental to what they're doing in their business. So ultimately, unfortunately, it all revolves around money. The world revolves around money. And that, unfortunately, is not necessarily always compatible with the best interests of people, their health, etc.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's why I also feel so excited that we get to be part of bringing this technology to the forefront and to the people. And I would actually really like to talk a little bit about the program. So the Healy contains these frequency programs, and you actually have the ability, so that the Healy comes with these different program groups, but you are a time waiver expert and you can actually create programs. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So the Healy comes with, depending upon which edition you purchase, up to like 250 different programs that deal in all different areas: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And you need to know that the Time Waver, which is a professional frequency microcurrent device, was developed approximately 15 years ago, and it has been used for the last, for that period of time in Germany, with I think they said about 2,500 MDs were using that device. And so they were looking, as I was actually, for a portable frequency device that they could give to their patients so that when they left the office, they could continue the work that was being done with the Time Waver. And they developed the Healy based on that. Well, all Healy programs are actually Time Waver programs because they were created on a Time Waver device. And as a Time Waver practitioner, I can then construct programs, what I call custom Healy health programs, based upon the needs of the actual person, that is asking to have a program made for them. So, for example, the Healy is great and it works in a lot of different areas, but when people have very specific issues or diseases, for example, things like MS or Parkinson's disease or Lyme disease or Epstein-Barr virus, there isn't a specific program in the Healy per se to deal with that issue. There are generalized programs to deal with the issue, but not specific programs. And my point of view is that the more specific you create a program, the easier it is to reverse that situation. Because if you think about it, you have a program and say it has 500 different frequencies in that program, and they're generalized frequencies, you're going to get so far. But if all of those 500 frequencies in that program were specific for that particular condition, then when you'd be using that program, you're working directly and sending only those frequencies for that condition to that person. And that's the difference between, how I work as a Time Waver practitioner and how the Healy works. And I have the ability, once I create the program, to send that program directly to somebody's Healy. Most people will notice there's a place in the Healy called the expert area. That's the area that you can contain up to 12 expert programs made by a Time Waver practitioner. And basically, we follow the same rules in creating a Healy program as we do in a Time Waver program. So if somebody came in to see me and wanted a Time Waver session, okay, which is an actual session with the Time Waver device, I would go about the session exactly the same way as I create Healy custom programs, which is the first 9 minutes of the session and a Healy program is devised by just sort of the word random comes to me in terms of frequencies because it's the ones that we don't choose. I don't choose specifically, but it's the one that the body resonates with because we do have a quantum sensor in the Healy and in the Time Waver. Obviously, a person is holding on to handheld electrodes, so it's reading the body. And so for that first 9 minutes, it's basically warming the body. I like to look at it as like warming the body up, sending frequencies to get the body used to what's going on. Then the next period of time, and this depends on the practitioner, the situation, the circumstance, usually approximately 45 minutes to an hour. The focus is then on what's called indications, which is exactly what the issue is that the patient or the client has. And so if a person comes in and, as I said earlier, has Lyme disease, then what I am doing is I am putting all the different frequencies for Lyme disease together for that person. And so that 45 to an hour part of the program is focused on that. And then the final part of the program, which usually lasts somewhere between 9 and 15 minutes, is what's called the resonance part of the program, where we use a higher level frequency at the end that again is chosen for that person in real time, and that sort of locks it in on the higher levels, on the emotional, mental, spiritual, because when we're dealing with any kind of health issue, obviously we're not just dealing with the physical body. All health issues are not just physical, but they do interact with your mental, emotional, spiritual part. And so that last part, that resonance part of the program, kind of locks it in on that level. So it's 3 parts of the program, and it usually runs about an hour, a little over an hour. And that's both for an in-person time waiver session, and when I create a custom program for somebody, I follow the exact same model. And then when it's done, a person will send me a TAN number, and that's an individualized number that's generated on the Healy, and that allows me to then place that number in my time waiver. And when I send it, it goes through the cloud, and it goes directly to the person's Healy, and then it just immediately downloads into their Healy. Just like when a new update is on the Healy, you'll get a message saying update available, and you download that update. And so that's how the Healy works in terms of how the programs were created, and that's how I work when I create custom programs for people. And that's the most fun that I have. I mean, I always knew when I got the Healy that ultimately I would be a time waiver practitioner, and I would be somebody that would be working with people, because that's what I've been doing for the last 46 years in my practice, is the fact that I've been developing what I call custom programs for patients from day one in the 70s. I used to do it by doing extensive laboratory and blood testing in the functional medicine realm, and once I got all that information together, I would synthesize a program for a patient, which would work with changes in diet and also various supplements that they needed, and that would be their program. But now I'm able to do it, with the advent of the Healy on a much more high-tech level, and I can create, frequency microcurrent programs for people that are very, very effective. I mean, I get emails back from people who I've created programs for, both for themselves and for their animals, and I myself sometimes are blown away with what they tell me are the results of the programs that I've made for them, because it seems that they're able to turn conditions around, even chronic conditions, serious chronic conditions, in a very short period of time if they use their Healy with that custom program. And I just want to put out there that if anyone that's listening is interested in getting a custom program for themselves, their animals, etc., family members, whoever, they can contact me at healydocsteve@gmail.com. That's HEALYDOCSTEVE, healydocsteve@gmail.com, and I'll send them the information of what is needed in order to create a custom program. I love doing it, by the way. It's one of my favorite parts of being involved in Healy, is that I get to do custom programs for people. And on a daily basis, I'll get emails from people all over the world that I've never met before, requesting a program, create it, send it to them, and then a couple of weeks to a month later, I'll get a follow-up email saying, Doc, I had to just tell you that program you made for me, unbelievable. We've been working on something for this person for the longest time, and when you created that program, it was like magic. That's why I always hear the word like magic. And when you work on the quantum level, you can expect those kind of results, because there's a synergy there. Again, everything is in resonance. So if you find, if you start to send a patient frequencies that are in resonance with, healing that particular condition, the body will automatically go into that state of resonance with that healing process. And I mean, personally, having been in the field for so many years and knowing, I would say, most devices that are out there, I can honestly say that there's nothing that even comes close to Healy on all levels, because of what it has. I mean, it has unique properties that most other frequency devices out there don't have. First of all, it's a microcurrent device. And yeah, there are a lot of frequency devices out there, but the difference between having a Healy is that just sending frequencies, and what most people do when they have other devices is they have a list, and they look at a condition, and they look at what's on the list, and they send that same frequency constantly every day, multiple times a day, to that person for the same condition. And if 10 people have that condition, they'll send the exact same frequency. Well, I've always felt and I've always known the whole concept for me when I started out in biochemical individuality is there's no such thing as cookbook medicine. In other words, one size does not fit all. And when people come into my office, for example, and say they have diabetes and I have 10 patients lined up getting to see me, every patient that leaves my office will have a very different protocol and program to follow because everyone's different, even though they're experiencing the same condition. Same thing with the Healy. The beauty of the Healy is we have a quantum sensor. That quantum sensor allows it to communicate with the body so that only those frequencies that that person needs at that moment in time are the ones that are being delivered. And it changes moment by moment, day by day, and also person by person. So if you have 10 people in a room and they're all treating the same condition, but they're using a Healy, if you walk around to look to see which frequencies are being delivered, you'll find they're all different because the people are all different. And the reason for their condition is all different. And then we have that whole microcurrent piece, which is, as far as I know, Healy is the only frequency device out there that really has the combination of the frequencies and the microcurrent. Well, that to me is, I like to always refer to as the secret sauce, because for years I was dealing with frequencies alone in my practice because that's what I had access to. And it wasn't until the microcurrent came along that I could really see the benefits of how much quicker and how much better a person got. So I look at the microcurrent as like the gas in a car. And I look at the frequencies like the driver in the car. So we have the gas, the power, and then the frequencies are actually directing that microcurrent into the various parts of the body that need to be directed into, depending upon what the condition is. And that's how that, I visualize that concept.
Oh, wow, Doc, I have so many questions. This has been so interesting. I've actually seen some people. Well, one of the questions I do want to ask is, are there any negative side effects or contraindications? I saw someone ask a question like their daughter has a rod because of scoliosis. Can she still use the Healy? Like who?
Yeah, let me talk about that because that's an absolute great question. So it depends on whether you're using microcurrent or whether you're using the Healy coil, which is more on the scalar wave. The situation with microcurrent is that you don't want to use microcurrent on somebody that has a pacemaker or somebody, for example, that has epileptic seizures or things of that nature. You wouldn't want to send a current into that person's body because of the possibility. Not necessarily it's going to happen, but we have to realize there is a certain possibility that you can interrupt a pacemaker or create a seizure situation in somebody by sending the microcurrent in. So for safety reasons, Healy recommends that it's not to be used in that respect. Same thing happens when there's some sort of a metallic implant in the body, like a rod or some sort of a implantable thing. You don't want to put the Healy, the microcurrents directly on top of that area because of the effect that it could have, creating heat or some other effect. Frequency alone, when you're dealing with the Healy coil, which is emitting scalar frequency, there are no as far as I'm concerned, there are really no contraindications at all. As long as you're using the coil and just sending frequency alone, there's no contraindications. Why? The whole principle of resonance. If you don't have a resonance with that particular frequency that is being delivered to you, it passes right through you. It has no effect. It's the same thing I say to patients, because I've been a practicing homeopath also since the 1970s. If a homeopathic remedy doesn't work, it has absolutely no effect on you at all. So there's no side effects of homeopathy in the same respect. So you don't have to worry. So that's the difference. If you're going to use microcurrent, just make sure it's somebody that doesn't have a pacemaker or defibrillator implanted in their body, somebody that is not apt to having seizures. And of course, we also throw in the pregnant woman situation too. And that's because you just never know. And you'll know that even supplements out there on the market will have a disclaimer on there saying not to be used, not recommended for pregnant women. And the reason for that is more of a legal thing than anything else, because say, for some reason, the baby was born and had some sort of an issue or deformation or something of that nature, then the parents are going to blame the supplement or the device or whatever to try to sue them for that situation when it may not have actually caused that. So again, for legal protection purposes, it is said by Healy and most other companies that have devices, it's not recommended during pregnancy. But I feel that using a coil, just to send frequencies, there's not really a chance that it's going to have a negative side effect because, like I said, if it doesn't resonate with the person, it goes right through them.
And I'm curious, you've mentioned this phenomenon of resonance, and that's what the quantum sensor does. It detects what you're in resonance with. So if it doesn't resonate, it just goes through you. So if it does resonate with you, how does the Healy know that? And
Well,
what
if it does
happens?
resonate, it creates a vibration. So the best way to look at this is if you play piano, for example, or somebody's heard a piano, a piano has 88 keys and there's, it repeats every 7 notes. And so you have on a piano maybe 5 C's all the way low to all the way high. Well, if you hit a C on a piano, you'll notice that if you listen carefully in the background, very lightly, you'll hear the other C's on that scale vibrating. If you were to lift the lid of a piano, you can actually see them vibrating because they're in resonance with one another. The same thing is if you have a tuning fork, for example, and you hit the tuning fork, and there's another tuning fork in the room or close by, that second tuning fork will start to actually vibrate and make a noise. Whereas if you have a tuning fork from a different key, say one is tuned to key C and the other one is F, nothing happens. Well, the same thing happens when frequencies are entering the body. Like matches like, and so if there is no resonance in that substance, it won't affect it. But if there is resonance in the substance, it will. So the greatest visual example I could ever put out there, and again, I'm in my 70s, so I don't know the age range of the people listening to this presentation. But back in the 60s and the early 70s, there used to be a commercial on television that ran all the time. And it was back then when we had cassette tapes, if people know and remember when we had those little cassette tapes. And it was called, is it Live or is it Memorex? And basically what they did is they took Ella Fitzgerald, who was a very famous singer, they put her in a booth and they had a crystal glass in another area, and she would hit this really high-pitched sound in her voice. She'd go up the scale, and then the crystal glass would shatter. And then they would show you by playing the cassette tape of her voice that was just recorded that the crystal glass shattered again, because they wanted to show that the tape was actually recording the exact frequency of her voice. And what we have in a crystal glass is we have lead atoms that are bound in a certain pattern. And when you strike the resonance of that lead atoms in the panel, it starts to vibrate to a point where it doesn't hold together anymore. And there's also been indications of, and this is also famous and known, you can look it up online, where certain bridges have collapsed when either a army has marched across the bridge and they've been in step, so they create that frequency, or the wind blows in a certain frequency and it starts to create a resonance that starts to make everything shake and all the molecules in the shade, and then it's destroyed. So it's the same principle in a way that works when we're dealing with frequency in that respect and frequencies being sent into the body.
Wow, this is so fascinating, and I love you have such a universe of knowledge about this. I'm seeing some questions here in the comments. Claire is asking if you can discuss the way the scan works on the Healy.
How the scan works? Well, it goes into resonance with the person's body and is able to, based on that, determine which programs would be best akin for that person based on that resonance. It all comes down, irregardless to how we talk about this, as you can see, it's all about resonance when it comes down to it. So the way it both sends out frequencies and works, and the way it scans a person, all has to do with that principle of resonance. So when it sends out, when the quantum sensor, sends out the vibration into the body and it's doing a scan, it's actually looking to see what are the resonances in the frequency of the person's body, and then it matches that to the database of what's in the Healy database, and it looks for where the resonance is, and then it shows up which program has the most resonance. So you'll notice when you start a Healy program, when you're doing a scan, it actually tells you on the screen to think inside of yourself when you're making that initial intention and that focus on which programs resonate with you the most, right? So there's a reason it says that word resonate with you the most, because it's all working on that whole concept of resonance.
Wow, this is so interesting. I know you got to go soon. I do have one question I hear from Jennifer. She's saying, if we purchase the Healy, or like the most expensive model, are we just getting samples, or do we need to purchase custom programs? Does the device adapt to people's individual needs as it is?
Yeah, I mean, it adapts to individual needs in the database of what's available. So obviously somebody that has the Healy Professional has more programs to choose from, to be able to get closer and closer. In terms of purchasing custom programs, I mean, that's specifically for the individual. Like I said earlier, when somebody has a specific condition, a medical condition, or it could be an emotional condition or whatever condition that they really want to focus on specifically, it's always best to get a custom program, because as I said earlier, that program is going to only be sending the frequencies designed to reverse that condition and no other frequencies. Therefore, you're going to get a much more powerful result, a quicker and more powerful result. Because, for example, as I said earlier, say somebody has Lyme disease. Well, there's no specific program that you receive with the Healy that's, quote, for Lyme disease. And they can't do that, because then you get into this whole thing, the principle of is this a medical device or a wellness device? And therefore, the Healy is a wellness device. If it was a medical device, they'd have to spend millions of dollars proving that it treats every single disease out there, which obviously they can't do. So in order to stay safe and in the legal limits, for example, in the US through the FDA, or up in Canada through Health Canada, and all countries have their own, specific medical rules and regulations, you can't really name a specific program that's given to the general public with a condition like this is going to heal Lyme, this is going to heal, Parkinson's, this, but with a custom program, there's no limitation there. So you can have a program that's specifically for that condition, that disease, and send it to that person. And there's no issue, because it's individual, it's one-on-one. It's not like you're putting it out there, for the whole world to be able to see and use. And that's the difference between, creating a custom program and just using one of the general Healy programs. Now, not to say that using one of the Healy programs is not amazing, because you can balance and do amazing things with just the programs that are available for you in the Healy. But again, if you want to go that extra step and you really want something that's very focused for a specific condition that you've been dealing with, then of course, I would always say the custom program is going to be your best choice.
Amazing, thank you. I see that Claire, actually, her question about the scan was about distance. So can the scans work at a distance on somebody?
Well, absolutely, yes. I mean, we do what are called remote scans all the time. So you don't even have to have the person physically with you in the same space. And that's because of the whole, concept of quantum entanglement. If you understand what quantum entanglement means, if there are two objects that are connected somehow, it doesn't matter how far the distance is. If you treat one, it's going to affect the other. And that whole concept, by the way, thankfully, was finally proven last year, because the Nobel Prize in Physics last year was given to a team of scientists that actually proved the concept of quantum entanglement. And I was hoping this would happen sometime, because I had always gotten that question. How can you, treat something here and have it affect somebody 1,000 miles away? Well, now we know that that's been proven. And that's why when you're treating somebody or scanning somebody that could be on the other side. I could be here in LA and scan somebody in New York and get exact results, is that in the Healy itself, when I'm doing the scan, I'm putting in a lot of very specific and detailed information about that person. I'm putting in their name, which is unique to them. I'm putting in their date of birth, and place of birth. I'm putting in their photograph. So once you do that, now you're absolutely locating that person wherever they are in the world by having all of that information. It's like a fingerprint. Only one person's going to have that photo, that place and date of birth, and all that information. And so when I am, working locally here, it doesn't matter where that person is on the planet. It's going to reach them in that place and either do the scan or send the frequencies to them. And that's why we can use the Healy in what we call the remote aspect, and both scan and balance people no matter what distance it is, between us.
Wow, Doc, this is just so fascinating. I feel like we could do like 100 of these interviews, but I know you don't have time because you have clients coming in.
Yes, in a few minutes, I have my next patient coming in.
Yeah, so thank
Pretty
you so much.
busy these days, I'll tell you. And that's something I'd love to speak to, because you mentioned the whole self-care thing at the beginning, and I want to put this out there to people because I think it's really important to understand. So the whole concept of disease or imbalance, for me, over all these years of being in practice, one thing that has held true that I noticed very early on in my practice with patients with any condition, and it's now been out there in the media for many, 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 many years. So I'm not really saying something new, but something very important, which is the fact that in terms of the way I look at the body, and I think you'll be able to do any kind of research and find that this holds true, is the fact that inflammation is the cause of all disease. So what I see when a patient comes in, there's always some form of inflammation that's occurring somewhere in the body that's attributed to disease. But the key is that and we can treat that, and we know that. But then I take it a step underneath that or before that, because I always like to treat people by looking at the underlying cause of things. I don't treat symptoms in my practice, because treating symptoms just create what I call chronic patients. But I look at the underlying cause, because when you can treat the underlying cause of a disease or an imbalance, you can remove it. And so it's no longer there. If you treat the symptoms, you're just creating a chronic situation where the person, if they don't take a certain, pharmaceutical or whatever, is going to continue to have that problem. So therefore, what is underneath inflammation, and what has been shown and proven to be the direct cause of inflammation, is stress. So ultimately, what we need to start to deal with in self-care for all of us is to find some way to handle stress on a daily basis. And I'll tell you something very interesting that I was able to determine because of my ability over the last 20 plus years to have devices in my office that actually physically measure the amount of stress that somebody's under. So when somebody comes in, one of the first things I've been doing for the last 20 years is getting an actual numerical measurement of how much physical stress and how much emotional, mental stress somebody's in. And because that to me is really important, because I need to know when I'm working with a patient, am I just dealing with something on the physical level primarily, or is this condition really being caused by something going on with them on the emotional, mental level? Because there's two ways of treating. And as we know, with traditional medicine, Western medicine, 99% of it is always focused on the physical level. Most docs don't even ask you about what's going on with you emotionally. And even if they did, they wouldn't even begin to treat you on that level. They would just say, go see a psychiatrist, etc. So I need to know, what's happening in terms of those levels. But what was really interesting is that over the 20 years, I pretty much come up with the whole knowledge that about 20% of patients that come to see me on the first visit are dealing with high levels of either physical or mental emotional stress, and we deal with that. That was pre-COVID. After COVID and the pandemic, what I have found, which is just amazingly interesting for me, is that now when patients come in to see me, 85% of all people that come in on the first visit are dealing with high levels of physical or high levels of mental emotional stress. And just those 3 years of going through the pandemic and everything that caused, has put everyone in that, what I call sympathetic stress. So we have a nervous system that's divided into what's called sympathetic and parasympathetic. And if you remember back to, high school science, the sympathetic is the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is what's called rest, relax, and digest. And so people go into what's called sympathetic, stressing out their adrenals. And in order to reverse stress, you need to move your body into what's called parasympathetic. And there are many ways of doing that. You can do things like meditation, you can do things like massage, you can do things like various types of yoga. These are all things that tend to bring the body back into a state of parasympathetic. The cool news is Healy has a program that can put you in immediate parasympathetic. And that's a program called the Bed Rest program that's listed in the sleep programs. And there's a certain way you have to use it, though. You can't use the wrist electrodes, but you have to be really specific. And so what I recommend people do is if they can get a hold of, ear clips, which you can find online, ear electrodes, you can use those. Or you can just use the sticky pads, the round sticky pads that come with the Healy. You can place them on the mastoid bone, which is the bone directly underneath and behind the ear. And if you run that bed rest program, and I always recommend doing it in the latter part of the day, because it does get you into that state of relaxation, ready for bed sort of place. You can switch off the sympathetic, which is how most people are. They're turned on to sympathetic, 24/7, and it moves them over to parasympathetic, which is that state of rest, relaxation, and repair. And since so many people these days are under that level of stress, they're creating much more inflammation. And if you know the charts that we show in Healy about how the Healy works with the microcurrent, as that level of stress and inflammation start to occur, the level of voltage in the body drops until you get to that point at about negative 15 millivolts, and that's when tumors begin to form. And I'll tell you something, it's amazing to see how many people these days are getting cancer. I mean, I'm shocked in a way. I mean, last month, I think, was the all-time high in my office, where I had 20 new cancer patients come in to see me. And usually I have, one or two, etc. But to have 20, I'm realizing that the effects of stress are really taking its toll right now on people, creating a lot of inflammation, lowering the voltage that they have in their body, and triggering tumors. But we have a technology to reverse that. Using our Healy every day brings our voltage up to negative 70 millivolts, which is the voltage of young, healthy cells. And then, of course, we have the frequencies that allow us to deal with whatever tissues, cells, or parts of the body that need to be balanced or reversed. But that's the whole key with the whole idea of self-care, is one must look at how much stress they're under on a daily basis and begin to do something to reverse that stress. Healy's a great way of doing that, because we have all of these stress release programs that are, part of the Healy. But to me, that's the key with self-care. We have the best self-care tool. And like I always say too, Healy is the best, not only the best self-care tool, it's the best anti-aging device also, because we have the microcurrent, which creates young, healthy cells all the time. And we also have the specific frequencies that contain the stem cells, or the stem cell frequencies, in the bioenergetic vitalization program. And when you combine the ability to deliver the frequencies of stem cells, which repair all the organs in our bodies, and at the same time, we raise the voltage in our bodies, which brings us to a level of young, healthy cells, that's the ultimate, the ultimate anti-aging device. I mean, I'm 72 years old, or will be shortly, and I've been using the Healy every single day for the last 4+ years. And I really feel that the Healy has kept me, young and healthy. So I will continue to use it ongoing. But as I said, I've been searching for a device like this for so many years. Finally, Healy came forward in my life a little over 4 years ago. I saw the benefits right away, and I just am, one of the biggest proponents of it, because I want as many people in the world as possible to have one of these devices so that they have that ability to do so many things, to balance themselves, to deal with stress, to deal with all other issues. It's the perfect self-care tool.
Wow, amazing, Doc. I really appreciate what you shared. And I heard you say this in another interview about putting the sticky pads on the mastoid bone, but I haven't tried it yet. So I'm going to try that tonight. I really like the bed rest program. In fact, since I started using the Healy, I'm sleeping better than ever, which is one of the biggest benefits for me. I was always struggling to fall asleep and stay asleep. So so yeah, so I know you gotta run. So thank you again so much for your time. Maybe in the future we could do an interview about anti-aging, because it sounds like you have a lot of information there. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great day. Feel free to hop off. I'm going to stay on and just chat with people a little bit longer.
North America, and it's been my pleasure always. I love to teach because, as you said, my whole, it's what my life's been about the last 5 years is bringing forward, Healy to people so that they can understand that we now have something amazing in our hands. That's really the answer to most people's problems. So again, thanks again. And yes, I need to jump off. My patient just showed up. And I always enjoy speaking with you.
Thank you. Thank you, doctor. I appreciate it very much. Have a great day and good luck with your patient. All right, guys. Yeah, you can just stay on for a minute. Yeah, gosh, I really enjoyed that conversation. Doc Steve is so inspiring and he has such a wealth of knowledge. I'm really curious if you can share in the comments like what stood out for you, what your takeaways were. And yeah, so he talked about the custom programs, but I really want to encourage people not to underestimate the value of the programs that come with the Healy. I know for me, I've been getting so much value already and really seeing these really potent shifts in myself. And I'm just excited to see what's going to happen over time. Also working with my animals too. I wish we had more time that we could go into the conversation about working with frequencies and animals. And yeah, guys, so I'm just checking the comments to see if there are any questions before we hop off. I know we didn't get to talk about the MRIs. That would have been interesting. Magnetic resonance imaging. So again, he's talking about this concept of resonance, right? So we can understand what we are in resonance with versus not in resonance with. That can be a really supportive information on this journey. So awesome, guys. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed this interview. So yeah, if you're interested, we are actually today and tomorrow are the very last days of the Black Friday sales. So there are a range of different devices. There is a 60% off sale on the professional device that comes, it's the Mac Daddy. It comes with all of the programs available. And then it goes all the way down to the basic device, the Gold, which comes with only 10 programs. I'm happy to chat with you guys about the options and what's possible. Feel free to reach out to me. Just send me a message. Frequency, do it right here on my page. You don't have to send me an email or anything. And I would love to, just share with you what I've learned, why I'm so passionate about this. And I can give you the link to look at the different options and talk you through what they are, and answer any questions that you have. And yeah, it would be my honor and pleasure to do that for you and with you. And we can talk about the animal stuff too. If that's, I know a lot of people are like, I don't really know about myself, but I want to support my dog. So it's like, great. That was part of why I decided to jump in, is because I want to support my animals, especially as they age. I guess that's what I'm holding on. I'm holding on to my animals. I asked a question in the High Vibe Tribe, what are you holding on to and what do you need to let go of? I'm holding on to Frank. I don't want to let go of Frank. All right, guys, I hope this has been supportive for you on your journey. Take what works, leave the rest. And I like what he said at the end about self-care is the new healthcare, and understanding that stress is the #1 cause of inflation or inflammation, probably inflation too. Stress causes inflammation. Inflammation is the #1 cause of disease. So one of the best ways that we can take care of ourselves, Healy or no Healy, is assess where you're encountering the most stress in your life. And that can be physical stress or mental and emotional stress. And what can you do to support yourself to reduce those stress levels? He touched on meditation being one. And I like also how he touched on actually talking about the nervous system and how when we're really stressed out, especially after these COVID times, we're in this state of heightened sympathetic nervous system activation, which is all that fight and flight, cortisol, like the the intensity of that stress response. And if we are always in that state, that's going to wear down, that's going to wear us down. So how can we shift ourselves into the parasympathetic nervous system, that relax and rest and digest state? So I know I'm really excited to try that program that he said with the electrodes here. So I think I'm going to do that tonight. I'll let you guys know how it goes. So so yeah, if you want to jump on the sale, I'm here to support you. If not, don't worry. And yeah, you just do what feels good for you, babe. I'm just here to shine some light because I think that this is a really, really cool, potent, and powerful doorway that we can walk through. Okay, guys, I appreciate y'all very much. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me directly. And I love you. Okay, bye, everyone.